Jamgön Kongtrül Lodrö Thaye Jinye Jamgön Kongtrül Lodrö Thaye Kunda Sip Mare Mentam Dungai Chezeve Roso Kona Puje Tarze Yenlai Choju Yongten Song Rodre Chedro Nyumon Yelong Leje Jagdon Ronze Mare Mensre Dungre Yugu Jinye Chunze Rajenam Dene Tajin Saju Tarze Luzo Jase Tuku Chundrai Chodang Chunye Jende Dagle Menzen Jambe Yong Lai Zedin Cheje Chinra Vuzreje Dagle Gaba Rapsarane Kadang Denju Jonglo Tokwa Ye Lodrö Pope Nova Zaldo Need me by the injecting some nata, Tambe Chödrak Singye Daba, Tamje Zimba, Kunjon Zenepe, Charlotte Zubi Norvedu, Dungrajaso, Tinta Me Garava, Droy, Zola Ju, Chasa Lo, Serap Gundo, Siye Tanile, Tamke Same Shage Zonshin, Shonjumin Berlang King Karmaba, Mishe Debe, Jivu Zuge. Lasso da Kazan Ti Song Songa Penna Shinjong Manjupin La Dene Semne Gulaso Ban Drumne Semne Guba Tengenzi Jena Yang Tengenzi Mares Yentun Pares Tengenzi de Shinjong Jekore Song.
So yesterday it was pointed out that for authentic shamatha to be achieved, it's necessary that the practitioner, in addition to the samadhi of the 9th level, also has attained thorough refinement by training that makes both body and mind workable. Now, until this is attained, the samadhi in question isn't authentic shamatha. It is a likeness of shamatha.
Da authentic shamatha se kan de chabur sana shinjong top nekap de.
So authentic shamatha is characterized by thorough refinement through training in terms of categorizing the samadhi at hand as authentic in the context of different levels of shamatha meditation.
Shinjong Singing Kandejrisana, Lovin Asangage, Gamba Kuntulende de Songsha Song.
Now, the Indian Buddhist master Asanga, in his compendium on Abhidharma, defines thorough refinement by training.
Tekung Kandej Song Yorsana, Lusim Nangin Lenchi. Lusim Nika la Nengi Lenchi Gewe Shavala Pardu Jemituba, Lusim Nika Gewal Kortubachire Song.
The quotation from this text reads as follows. It starts out with the following question: what is thorough refinement by training? It is what removes all obstructions to workability of both body and mind, since it interrupts counterproductive physical and mental states.
Penna Ludan Semi ngacho gewala kor untu gewala kol wala bhardu kin diparshepe bhardu paten so khanga setwa jigla tene Xinjiang chebates.
It breaks the continuity of both physical and mental rigidity, which makes for impediments in terms of achieving authentic shamatha.
Tan de relation to shena pena lu Xinjiang de nanjo patala de songdwa
Lu Xinjiang
동본 주변도 샘 신장 등주고요. 대원이 정도. 다 류신장 주배 난조빠지나. 당에 류인데라 개와 주비라 까시산 매봐. 대견도 류지 미개와 된저 바도 제 메도가 된대지 차고요.
Lyge migevarava vartu chemetu sirikanishi
바도 제 메도가 생게 신장 주배 난조를 받게 류고네 고마고에 속제 메성마제 된조잔 제금 말해 나게
ngaki
나고네 전 참아 지중 나찰라서 자완 미능어 먼저와도 강가 공부요 언데네
re tinayang gyumsun karare dangpo sem Xinjiang drup girava
제
da sem Xinjiang drup sarve shuko tene da lunga yimigeve shavachi gimarava gyumsun michevi gyumsun de marave sem Xinjiang drupe gyumsun marave
레레 이나양
gyumdrigi
좀되게 되와 대제 대송자 동고샘 신종 루그레 송도
So, in terms of thorough refinement through training, first, refinement is attained in the context of the mindset, and then apparently in the context of the body. Now, if we look at thorough refinement through training in the context of the physical body, what are the rigid states overcome? Well, non-virtue in general, but here in the context of the physical body, in specific physical deeds and verbal deeds. You have the 10 non-virtuous actions, and a number of them are physical deeds, a number of them are verbal deeds. And here, in terms of a practitioner who has attained thorough refinement through training as to the physical body, will no longer engage in or perform, as it were, any of these deeds, non-virtuous deeds, the ones named physical deeds and the ones named verbal deeds, because the vehicle for those deeds, as it were, the primary perspective there, as it were, is that of the physical body. So a person who has attained both levels of thorough refinement through training will not engage in those non-virtuous deeds. Thus, the continuity of non-virtue is interrupted.
대간 신게 샘 신종 딱대 류 신종 르반난절 바데 chödrak 류라 깔래춘 매워 차 그래서
There are further perspectives here, namely that the practitioner, in terms of engaging in meditation, virtuous deeds and the like, is no longer held back by physical states which interrupt practice.
대간 신게 신종 르반난절 바데 류 신종 르반난절 바데 차츠나 나란선 더큰 바지나 데네 컴지 세다 니 데저 쭉 초야라 고고여와 데저 시라 고고마레.
In terms of an individual of the desire realm, that is to say, someone who hasn't achieved thorough refinement through training, that person, in order to be able to function, needs to eat solid food, he needs to drink liquids, and he needs to rest and sleep in order to at all function in any way, shape or form. Whereas a person who has attained thorough refinement through training isn't that dependent upon taking solid food and the rest. Lugi Xinjiang de Dangpo She Goya, Tene Kararesena Gyumtrigi.
Gyumbregi Reva Sonsa won is trying good.
Re in the Dangpo de Gyumtrigi de Masonga Chene, Tene Lugi Xinjiang.
Xinjiang Sonya and the inside. Naranzo Toman in the loose and get Gacham which Sigidor. Lute Lapanas Sam good in Yem good in the child, a Karina, some girl. This same Xinjiang Rupataro.
Chetsam Tenesem Xinjiang Rupala Ten Lugi Xinjiang and the Chik.
Ya, younger you are a taste soon the one than a round of Yungudo. Then they carry is an number continuum and the descent doa. Penna Guntuganang la Lu Tang Semjil Len Semji Nangan Lin Yunjeb Shir Lu Tang Sem Les Rongwa said Lusem eat the Lumen Song Shadow. Tea Rotang Chene, they song is at Mato Yenda, Kayo Summer. Jamgön ke long term Brahman dread no doa.
Tene Tanda Karasong Song Shu de Narang de Mato.
Yes.
Che Rikpe Tojeki.
Penna Yang Rikdo Kuchundu ne Zemshiraz Gogmares Hegitoa. Penna Ganzo Jeb Kabaguno Subdun Kabin Jebre Tene Kumashapa the Haman Jack Gunda Sinchus near Sumra Zem Gogmarish. Then Ningun Ripatunga
Near Sumre, Dintra Chicken and La Songyor.
Madame Guma Zemgrema.
Aha, oh, Chutu ni Pasum Pamato.
Ya, Chuse Tango ne mazem na somba sajine ya yin cha yorish te tang aran se tende je cheda nyima nyinga nyogudo ga te nyobye chun mere.
So Khenpo Rinpoche gives the example of the late Karmapa, Jamgön Kongtrül Lodrö Thaye, whom he met for the first, well, not for the first time, but whom he met with in exile as a young child. He had met with him previously in Tibet, but he met with him in Sikkim, where the late Karmapa had settled in exile, and where Khenpo Rinpoche's family went to also in exile, having fled Tibet. Now, at the time of meeting His Holiness in exile, His Holiness had reached the age of 37 years old. And from then on, Khenpo Rinpoche studied and meditated under his guidance at the Rumtek monastery, the seat of the Karmapa in exile, and met with him daily there. And he says the late Karmapa would be an example of someone who had attained thorough refinement through training, which was evident to those around him, in that His Holiness apparently never slept more than a few hours at night, perhaps 2, 3, at the most 4. And that's simply how it was. He never slept long hours, which would indicate he did not need to do so. And any person who has not attained thorough refinement through training, people like ourselves, if we have slept only 2, 3 hours, we feel sort of off the whole day. But apparently that was not the case with His Holiness. And Khenpo Rinpoche was told by the attendants, the other attendants of His Holiness, who had been with His Holiness since he was a child, that this is how it always was. His Holiness had never slept more than a few hours every night, and he did not feel tired, overburdened, and so on during the day because of having slept too little. That wasn't the case. So Khenpo Rinpoche says this would be an example of someone who had attained thorough refinement in both its perspectives, mind and body.
Panna tanda ngaranzo yang thaya dojil chashana ya. Ta rinpoche shiwar sha ne rinpoche kudung kalang bulu yobe kabla. Nima nyingang rinpoche dongcho song choga. Gongda tsing la rinpoche kudung dun la dun cha nyingren la zan ma zamba yu song.
Now, the present Karmapa, Trinle Thaye Dorje, is another example of the same, which Khenpo Rinpoche himself has witnessed on many occasions, in particular in terms of the time just after the late Shamarpa had passed away, and his remains had been brought to Kalimpong and were housed in the shrine room of the Institute for Higher Buddhist Studies there, founded by the late Shamarpa. Now, during the entire day, there were in the shrine room the members of the monastic body and His Holiness, who presided over the rituals done on this occasion. Khenpo Rinpoche was there too, and he tells us that His Holiness would take part every day in those rituals. He presided over them, and at night, for a period of 2 weeks, he was seated in meditation in the shrine room in the presence of the remains of the late Shamarpa. So apparently he did not sleep at all for a period of 2 weeks, which didn't appear at all to incapacitate him in any way, shape or form. He would, at the end of the day, tell his attendants to go and rest, sleep for the night, and telling them there is no need for you to attend to me. I'll take care of myself, and then he would remain in the shrine room the entire night without sleeping. However, Khenpo Rinpoche and other attendants did during the night take turns to go to the shrine room to see if His Holiness possibly would need anything, and this never happened, and he was always seated there in meditation. That's how it appeared to the onlooker. So individuals who have attained thorough refinement through training in its two perspectives, the body and the mind, are quite unusual individuals. Now the present Karmapa, Trillö Thaye Dorje, on another occasion traveled to a place of pilgrimage associated with the Indian Buddhist master Padmasambhava, Guru Rinpoche, and in particular this place in the Himalayan foothills of Nepal, at a place called Maratika. This place of pilgrimage is in particular associated with so-called long life practice or meditation. The place is said to be imbued with the spiritual influence of Guru Rinpoche. The type of spiritual or the specific spiritual influence that would make for a longer lifespan.
Then that number match up some shows travel. Not the la Deshagins. Not
Travel Deshagin.
Travel Mare, travel cheat around the Champanji, Tina Yuk de Gains. They take you jar. You name Yamasum Saint Nigrin la. Should take what you are, mother. Chapsaya peg government. 강간 제국면도 다 람샤랍 잔센다 상상름제 콘나버지 셈테션 요소 때 대인도 배나 감지 세를 뜨고 그면도 와
때 셈테 제고야 가요.
다 자는 강간시 마대 잡상을 폐 마대 다 강제 오나스네 뇽나 가이스 텐데 셈젠제 송
Now, while there, His Holiness had stayed in a small, well, retreat hut, I suppose one would call the structure, just next to the cave of Maratika. And for a period of 3 days, he simply stayed there in meditation without taking any food, nor drink any fluids, or needing to go to the bathroom. Now, there were many people who had traveled with him there, the members of the monastic body, which included quite a few monks, lamas, and reincarnates, tulkuts. And you may know some of the reincarnates in that they have traveled to European centers, such as Lama Chirap Jansen Rinpoche, Sangsang Rinpoche, and others. Now, it appears that the two of them, Lama Chirap Jansen Rinpoche and Sangsang Rinpoche, even started worrying in that His Holiness didn't move from the spot for that long period of time, thinking this may end up in various physical discomforts. Perhaps His Holiness would even fall ill, in that he hadn't eaten or drunk at all, nor been to a bathroom. However, nothing of the sort happened, and again one can then conclude with certainty that His Holiness has attained thorough refinement through training, both with respect to the body and the mind, and therefore taking solid food and the like isn't the need for that isn't the same as the needs an ordinary person has in this regard, a person who has not attained thorough refinement through training.
단 dornan din zute namtar sho tamuch tengi yorwa shinjong drpe namtar mato temin de zute lo dawa kase tengen zen yug jana yug tunking ti chasar.
In terms of the life of a master like that, there are many examples of the master's attainments to be witnessed by disciples and others during the lifetime of the master. Now, a period of 3 days may seem short and therefore perhaps not that significant. However, one shouldn't be too literal about things. One can conclude that a person who remains in meditation without needing to take solid food and the like for even that shorter period is presumably or probably a person who could remain in meditation for months on end without solid food and the like. So this is what happened there and then in Marathikar is an indication of that.
Tene sem shin jong sing de tingen sing top ji sem de gewala jitsam kor jana kor tuba.
Then there is thorough refinement through training in terms of the mindset. And here the practitioner who has attained this level is no longer troubled by negative mental states. The individual is able to freely engage in meditation and the like, in different types of samadhi, without being impeded by non-virtue arising in the mindset. That does not happen, as well as other possible troublesome or negative mental states. Now, in terms of which of the two is achieved first, it is thorough refinement through training in terms of the mindset that is achieved first. It's achieved before thorough refinement through training as to the physical body.
And they Lula David Nambachi. Eat on was lebio, eat on with Sorwach. Tene Penna gave a che to Kaleka said Jamna Chick, Zupu Kaleka, Jundrabun, Yob, but no one of the Tension. Pechan and Desungudua, Lu Xinjong Tiang, Lujin Nangi, Reja Chaparajin, Che, eat on was yen chi, Semjon and Maino, Suntua.
Tenedi Xingban Yinang was on the cheek.
Yeah, they lute Kadeshagis and Tene lute back, Kasej Korjana, Korchocho, Lu Young Baship Chow.
So you have this type of suppleness, as it were, in terms of the body, which means that physical heaviness, etc., is no longer at hand. Various troublesome physical states, which would normally interrupt the meditation, no longer happen, simply because, as to the physical body, there is thorough refinement. Thus, the meditator can remain in meditation for extended periods and the like. The meditator, thus, is not hindered or impeded in any way, shape, or form by non-virtue. Non-virtue that may occur and may interrupt and impede the meditation in terms of someone who hasn't attained this level of refinement. Depression rồi.
Kandi ketsa do e.
Mare na din ye ma song ina.
Nga ma che lep chare. Sem shin jong re gi mendo, sem shin jong re gi mendo se de yonde gi le.
Me tanda de Lu Shin Jong song songa.
Ja za de
Lu Shin Jong gi drop tang song de chiki. Ge bala kasu kol go na de kol to bala sopa. Mare ve.
Yes. Te chana te se ne nga ma pha song re ze.
La so.
Te se ge wa shin kol to ba rong te.
O tene Sem Shin Jong yang song songa.
Ya ta de chana
Sem Shin Jong kan de song song.
Te yin tu sem shin jong sa te ne ta ma shu na dik sa che na hye de song. Lu de shin bar na shin yang ba chan ro
Me
re.
ding e kan de shu yin de mare ves re song songa.
O ta te sem shin jong sin ke de kan de che re sa na. Sem yin ne ngen len. Ne ngen len te kan de sa na. Nyo mo yu na le sa yong re le sa na. Ni song sem la so ne ngen bal je je ge nyen ga yo ro. Tori ki ten jen to je ba yin na yang dung hal te ba nyen ga yo ro.
Then there is thorough refinement through training in the context of the mind, where refinement is explained as follows. The practitioner has removed troublesome negative mental states and can therefore freely engage in meditation and take pleasure in that. Now, what is meant with troublesome negative mental states? Well, the afflictive obscuring states, independence upon which an ordinary person acts and therefore accumulates so-called karma, which may, in terms of non-virtue, lead to a rebirth in one of the three lower existences, and the conditions, the very difficult conditions of life in the three lower existences. Even though a person may take a higher rebirth, any worldly rebirth would involve suffering in consequence of the actions that have been enacted on the basis of afflictive obscuring states. So those troublesome negative mental states have been overcome in consequence of attaining thorough refinement through training as to the mind.
Tati nyomon te pongbe shirtu zondu jitsam de gewa la semde pet gahi troshindo njung rogre son.
And here, because of afflictive obscuring states no longer manifesting, the practitioner, in terms of his mindset, takes pleasure to a very great extent, a much higher extent than previously, in virtuous action. So, thus, the mind becomes workable in a virtuous context.
Ta te ni sungare. Lu Shin Jong to Sem Shin Jong ni pote na ne.
Ta di ma ola pep song reve.
That and that's Tinima Moo to Niyong.
Sem le rung ino. De ni kyang sem le rung shin jang ngon tu che shin. De tu lu shin chang che ve gyo. De road sarva.
That they dress jeg dress and the Nisa soon do soon.
Mare nge diginang latan diginang latan da dra tu gemendu.
Okay.
Che sang pöyig nang la kava lep de tanda. De ni kyang.
They ni jang sem ling.
De condition to de re. Da di sem shin jang dang pore sung tsarwa.
Yeah, don't worry, it's a yin shoe song. Then the Garan, the young just don't go.
De yang kere tanda.
That young just did that's our song. That Yachan the Ticket.
Marita nge di nye go gendo ga de kava dra go ge me.
That and that the drought and Ticket. Tang ye dry.
Chi sung sung go.
They ni jang somewhere. They ni is the Lu Xin Zhong to Sem Xin Zhong Ni Song Re. They yin Ni Gnan Sem Le Rong Xin Zhong to Hun to Jegres. Di Nu Palatene Lu Xin Zhong Te Jie Yong Do Song.
So thorough refinement through training as to the mind arises first, and therefore it is followed by the attaining of thorough refinement through training as to the physical body.
Tate Lu Xin Zhong the Jie on do Kadesh Jeg to Sana. Do you get better? Chasang ma chap to us. Penangarans of Luke Nanga, Papu Zemutun Layang, Chabjik Long the Rogiorwa. Tin Rowan Nanshin, Chene, Dengensing Dewate Chabung Grace.
In effect of which the body is pervaded by a specific prana. The prana said to pervade each and every part of the body. This prana, now in effect of the attainments, circulates throughout the body, and one becomes free of, or the body is therefore freed of, negative physical states, and physical refinement then is at hand. Dirve.
Yeah.
Nientu.
That Tesung Godoa. Mara.
Da Chisa nor songre.
Tan Desung Godoa. Jewe Jur Churbe, Lung Lula Jushin, Chape, Lucin Nangan and Tarte, Lu Xinjong Jewer, Nisa the Shadow. What I did.
And this explanation is given in the scripture named the Shravaka stages.
Da Lu Xinjong Te, then Candida Ucheresna, Lu Nangla.
Now, physical refinement here is not a mental event, but a specific pleasant physical sensation. Now, in the Shravaka stages, the development of refinement in this context is explained as follows. First, a subtle experience of refinement occurs. Tene de rakpa de song song e.
Ya tene tel mutun kamna tene shinjong rakpa ti che yong res.
Which may be difficult to recognize. Then a more obvious experience of it occurs, one which is easily recognizable.
Tene ta lusim ki shinjong te rakpa ti che yong tu lu ten shindu devo cha nenga ne chamu chi yang meba cha gre che.
After this, intense physical pleasure and mental joy pervade oneself. Tene, de kyapne, and in consequence, illness and the like will not arise
Tene semla
or will
ne
not happen.
semla
Tene
ne
lysem deda want to chepa.
gawa che par che gres.
And a special or unusual experience of joy arises.
Ta lu dang sem ni la dewa gawa che par chin te che says.
So, in consequence of these experiences, as to refinement through training in terms of the body and the mind, in consequence of this,
che se sem shinjong ge gawa thela tene sem lan jita zawa ni ma res pong thoas.
rigid states do not happen, and in particular, as to refinement in the context of the mind, karesung song de
Te sem pong thoa de sem la po ba dang che pa
sem la kare.
pong thoa sung do a
Pang toga kan. Are batu chepa me pa chene miktubia dirve.
ya to de shin tar shin do de hu do ena de do te che bi se gawe sem pong thoa jur la
De sung songa.
Ja.
De la tene gava ke pa chen ke ge
Che.
ka sung songa.
te la tene sem pong thoa de sem la shamba zan me ba
And in effect of the extraordinary joy or the extraordinary experience of joy, confidence arises, which means that the practitioner no longer, or his mind no longer harbors expectations in terms of fearing one thing or another, or fearing certain conditions, circumstances, and so on. So fear is counteracted, meaning that the mind has attained a high level of confidence in terms of the progress, or in consequence, of the progress made.
ta tengen zen de ju le yun kin te la pen na kangal tang jikta che ge be ne su kan de je tu na yang po ba yang shang ge ma de lan jikta yang che
So this practitioner, even though he may find himself in what's seen as very difficult circumstances, his mind is not fearful of those circumstances. He has the confidence to face whatever happens.
다 뉴심기 신종 좀나 진행 유지 심제 차에 체들이 송거죠. 다 동념기 셈들라 류당 점마진 로그를 송해 진도가 대책들 레리진도 맞대나
말에 얘는 직내 센터식 마 밥들 가봐 밥팅에 먼저님이 학고금이라
대들 이제 덮어대 단 데려와 나 셈뽕토원 줄라 동념 세네 감페 남시 드마다위 신종 떡지 신내 토pan 인사를 해 송.
년살을 시 자 년살을 시 당에 디나란 예고군 전에 컨트 송야를
단데레 따테 다 마무트니 휴샤는 디서 벤나 난저파데 셈 동념수 내데 갑 인나양
I need to find it. 통념수 제네 샘디 방토var jurpalla tene 통념수 제네 송이노가 곰페
야
tene
동념수 전에 감대나양 벤나
통념수 제네 송두
동념수 전에 세데 벤나 something 예베셈라고 동념수 셈지 게라 남버 자데 난저파텔라
Sukangi shipa kogogreina.
Yeah.
So, in consequence of what has been achieved, as to what was just explained, the practitioner now is able to rest in a state of proper equipoise, a balanced state, as it were, corresponding to the fourth level of samadhi in the realm of form.
다 딘데지 게르 남버 자나양 류 데와탄 셈 가와테 펜나게 류기 트마신도 난저파테라 대두양 요레 송거죠.
And here as well, the experiences of, in terms of the physical body, that were explained earlier as to a sensation of bliss, and the experience explained earlier in the context of the mind, that of joy and being able to, in an unhindered manner, freely engage in any type of samadhi and so on, a mindset of just virtue. At this level, the equanimous state of the fourth level in the realm of form, that continues. These experiences continue.
신종 타르시나 데네 시네드 줍투데 요레스 줍투베 세라고 드레스
Drup to be say, c'est du, tanda?
다 네 신내 가든 누구래 나 신내 누구 체진다고 가르치려 하고 그래서는 신종 주바들에
So here Dadi Sukamgi Angi Shipa de la Kogogere.
다 주kam게 안기 제바 있는다 나 앙탕보티 있는다 대신종이 체다고 되나 야.
Now in terms of how one measures, as it were, the level of authenticity as to the shamatha meditation of an individual practitioner, the measurement, as it were, is that of having attained or not attained thorough refinement through training as to both the body and the mind.
단 대송에 된대래 좋아라. 배나 신내 의지 셈때 something 당국가 delay 제기요래. 니빨래야 요래. 삼발래야 요래.
Now, it isn't a must that the practitioner has attained the fourth level of samadhi in the realm of form. Authentic shamatha can be attained by way of or with the first level of samadhi, for example, as the basis, as to or in the realm of form.
신내 타침베네 갑때 something yibatere 송데. something yibe meanle rante something 송아로 야쇼트.
However, the samadhi of the fourth level is the highest, the best suited, as it were, in terms of authentic shamatha.
단 dorna hinne tsambawate dakamdi nekkamna yongyoare.
And then we had what is called a likeness of actual shamatha or authentic shamatha, which can be achieved in the desire realm. So if the practitioner in question is an individual of the desire realm, who achieves any of the levels of samadhi in the realm of form, right? And on the basis of those achievements, he is able to perfect shamatha meditation. That is, he can attain thorough refinement through training in its two perspectives.
Oh yeah, that tendrege drup chatu ti tumdenda kharesana shidang nang yingwa zan yung mare che.
And because of the achievements listed, both inner and outer distractions have been discontinued or are discontinued, as it were. And the practitioner is able to effortlessly maintain his focus in meditation. So both dullness and agitation are thus overcome.
대더라 이제 토파 대송
Där var efter det.
다 대송나 다 마데르 한데로 와 엔난데리 대더라 이제 토파 대
Kangi yichi.
다단다 신종 대 톱용투 송으로 와
Yichi det Xinjiang la på.
신종 보고도 안 될까
So having attained this level, that of shamatha accompanied by or conjoined with thorough refinement through training, in consequence of this attainment,
대개 zukamjise dübe semtang lü ge xinjong zhup yongte ta tongbo chongun zhupa zukam chongu dela togur sona
I really have to find it here. Deta yiche topate suki se
dübe
dype sem se du.
zugse dübe se de zukam ge tingen zin te dübarwa penna zukam ge sabatang dakam sabani de kakarwa
Re?
de inde 단다 난교파티 유기 셈때 가르쳐 되버렸으나 zukam지 셈차 되버렸어.
Du kan pagina, ja.
Det kan begynne.
So even though an individual still lives in the desire realm, as it were, this practitioner we're looking at is one which has attained any of the samadhis of the realm of form, which results in that his mindset is the mindset of the corresponding level of samadhi in the realm of form. Du kan pisem rede om aretana. He has gone beyond the mindset of, or mindsets of, individuals in the desire realm. Even though to an outsider this is the same old person, perhaps, in terms of appearance and the like, the same person he knew before, a fellow human being in the desire realm. To the onlooker, that's how it appears, but in terms of the individual, the practitioner who has attained what was described, his mindset, or the mindset of that practitioner, is no longer the mindset of individuals in the desire realm.
제가 나신 게 루신종 루송외 난줄바데 게 루대양 더컴베 루레요 말테두 zukam게 루차로요. 신종 좀나
that applies to the physical body as well, in terms of how it functions and the like.
penangaranso trupchentin namtar jedu ta trupchentin namkala pursongre tranonjo songse so kanka lushinjang drupson darwa.
There are accounts of Buddhist masters of old in terms of their biographies, of how some of them flew through space, some of them went through rocks, walked straight through a solid rock, and the like. Now, these events are events that point to that these individuals had, in consequence of their attainments as to thorough refinement through training, gone beyond the impediments or rigid states in terms of both mind and body, that apply to those that in general apply to individuals in the desire realm.
Voilà so. De bes kan zu ji se du be sem dong lu xin zhong dang. Tene se jik ba yi wo chung top bes. Top ba dang shira sam dem be nam ba jin chi lam ji nyom pung la nu pa dang dem ba dang song do a. Ta te song de ta te ge 신종 총우드 톱 킹게 난줄 봤대게
다 수감 기탄 보디 에르고
당보드 톰킹게 난줄 봤대
테네데라 총우 드링아 체야 숨 이저라
야야
다 총알라 고츠도
다 총우 톰킹 되게 직대 바이나 되네 총우 삼바데 락반라고 drink somebody tawanda which mean ne kong le yan ro gre chep
chungu kandre
penna zukam something thangbu tingen jin chungu number jin yorwa
re
te maji wa da kuch
or shira ke number
ya shirag number jin chene jikten pe tingen jin kab le yan ro gre chep
jikten pe ting it sin down condition drill Google ina.
Ta sinegi yite jiktin patan jiktin depanika yite sinetre yorwa. Okay. Tan jiktin pasuk kande chegi yorsana shirak number tene ten kone kondun rogre chapter.
Jikten pe ina.
Yeah.
Hindu la sopa.
Ya Hindu la sopa.
La so.
Jikten lan deben nangba yina base shine de ya ne demba yi namba chin te ne jikten lan de ro re chabar.
So we're looking at shamatha, one-pointed attention. And if one looks at it in the context of a worldly tradition, that is to say, a tradition that engages in these methods of shamatha that have been described for the sake of, for example, acquiring a rebirth in the realm of form or the realm of no form. Here, for them to achieve their goal, that type of higher rebirth, they go through, among other things, in terms of method, an analysis of the various levels of samadhi in those higher existences. And in the realm of form, for example, there are 4 principal levels of samadhi, ranging from lower to higher, or subtle, rather coarse to more subtle types of samadhi. Each of them have sub-levels. You have a lower level, a middling level, and a higher level. As to these different levels of samadhi and their subdivisions. And evidently, the lower on the scale you are, the more coarse your samadhi is. The mindset of the samadhi is coarser than the mindset of a samadhi on a higher level. And worldly approaches referred to or named worldly because the goal is a rebirth in a higher worldly existence, such as the realm of form, for example. The practitioners are set to comparing the quality of a lower samadhi to a higher, and so on and so forth, ranging from the coarsest to the most subtle, for the purpose of striving to attain the most subtle type of samadhi. However, whichever level of samadhi that is achieved, it is a worldly state. It's a higher existence within a so-called impure world system. Whereas the Buddhist practitioner, in terms of achieving any of the samadhis within the realm of form, and as has been pointed out, the fourth level is the best in terms of making the most progress. However, the other levels can also serve as a basis for progress. But here, the focus of the Buddhist practitioner is to rid his mindset of afflictive, obscuring states, reduce the power of those states in consequence of the samadhis achieved. Because the Buddhist practitioner trains in these levels of samadhi for the purpose of achieving liberation from samsara. So the purposes vary in terms of worldly traditions and other worldly traditions, and therefore also the methods, as it were, or what one tries to achieve by way of those methods.
Oh yeah, that today in a capitala nang to Nyambrayana, then Nyamjala Seki the Chena, then Deb knew to Jayung Gray so much.
Daddy Chirtamirtanre, Yangena Tanda Kang Shevate Nang Drelgo Gendo.
Tanda Kang Shevate than Drelgo, Tanda Chetan Tigene,
Jikten Pagi Luxorina, Tenishira Nampachende
Gam. Yeah. They come.
Tele Nangpaina Dempashi Latago window.
Yeah.
De la Tene Nyon Jongwa.
Nyomon Kanga Jong Rogre.
So, in terms of the Buddhist practitioner, reducing, as it were, the force of afflictive, obscuring states, that he achieves primarily by focusing one-pointedly upon the four truths and their various perspectives. And once there is the capacity to rest in an even state, a state of equipoise, that makes for rapidly achieving thorough refinement through training. Nangtu Nyamparshapana Nyurva Lysem Shintu Chevada.
Tati Che Yondepena Nang La Tan Jiktin Betting and Zayana Nang La Mutu ne Koranso Nyamja Nang Bayana Dingen in the Compelton draw ne 녀몽 원주르든 좀 고는로 그래서
Hinduerna.
야
Nyönmong de ma gonen.
고는로 그래서 되네 다 낭바이나 대진 남바진도 다용도 되네 당진당 녀몽도 좀 그래서
So, on the basis of the level of samadhi, the extent of resting in a balanced state, there are variations, as was explained, because the higher levels, of course, will make for more rapid progress. However, all of them make for progress to some extent. And in terms of the worldly tradition, where the main focus is the analysis as to the various levels of samadhi and the aim of achieving as high a samadhi as possible, there the primary effect of the efforts is that afflictive, obscuring states are suppressed to the point where they no longer manifest in the mindset of the practitioner. However, they are not yet uprooted. Whereas in the context of the Buddhist practitioner, because of the method being different, the method is that of focusing on the Four Noble Truths in their various perspectives, in effect of which no self can be attained, and thus afflictive insight of no self can be attained, and therefore the eradication of afflictive, obscuring states follows. So, because of the method, the result, here you find those differences just listed.
단데 태바샤라 바지젠 송비어 말와 딤비 송데 데이지 니토지 택벤데 세그레 태바심벤데 세그레스 예와 세그민도와
디난라
단데 내감들라
그래
딤미시 온데 데이지 내루 체진도 통화들라 니토 배정 통남 세기요래
denshi kan det så
demba yene chu kare yimba zik tubatela nitu keyang dela thonam segi yorala techin ke te thonam to khelin gerwa o checha demba namba chin songgoya tin sare
in tongtang de chikpa mara
tongtong de chikpa mare ta chishe kabrowa 다 통통 세다 가르나 대신 그 통수 카카레 니도 그 통수 카카레 양시에 당지 요래
다메기 통통
yeah
so you have the Four Noble Truths and their attributes or perspectives. Now, both in terms of Theravada Buddhism and Mahayana Buddhism, that focus is used, and in both Buddhist divisions, it is taught that independence upon this method, the path of seeing is attained, both according to Theravada Buddhism and according to Mahayana Buddhism.
라소 다들이 단다 참대 야기 되네 다 저와 멍고 질래대도 다때 저와 내에 그 뒤서도 또 시송 다 도공 시로다 가세 투투 질린 얘기.
So that ends today's lecture. The question and answer session tomorrow. Khenpo Rinpoche explains that quite a few questions had come in. It's a pity all of them came at the very end, because the time limit is perhaps not enough to answer all of them. However, we will see. So Khenpo Rinpoche says he will try to answer as many of the questions that the time frame allows for, at any rate.
대 가르스는 도공 시로 내 레와들 다른 게 사마코스 나온다. 신에도 차선 로트나 템베라와이 또 제파송 토마텔라비.
Now the question and answer session will begin with some final explanations as to this part of the text, the part concerned with shamatha meditation. So that will also take a bit of time.
되네. 다 들어와. 라소 되네. 신슈에 가면도.
라소.
소남다에 담제 색바네 탐네 예베 단함 팜세 제가나제 발라투바 시게 초렌도와 도와 산이 코서 말아.